Some betrayals don't come with screams. They arrive wrapped in velvet, disguised as celebration, only to carve silence deeper than any knife. The silver anniversary band felt heavy in Julia's coat pocket as she navigated through the bustling streets of downtown Seattle. 15 years of marriage, wrapped in burgundy velvet, waiting to surprise Ryan at his office. The spring air carried a hint of warmth, matching her excitement about their upcoming anniversary celebration. At 38, Julia had mastered the art of balancing her successful career as a marketing strategist with being the supportive wife everyone admired. The elevator ride to the 27th floor of Harding and Levine felt longer than usual. Julia checked her reflection in the mirrored walls, smoothing her chestnut brown hair and adjusting her navy blazer. The security guard waved her through with a familiar smile. After all, she'd been visiting Ryan's legal firm for over a decade. Mrs. Evans, Rachel, Ryan's secretary, jumped slightly at her approach. "I wasn't expecting you today." Something in her tone made Julia pause, but she dismissed the warning bell in her mind. "Just surprising Ryan for our anniversary," Julia smiled, already walking past the desk. "Is he in a meeting?" "Wait, Mrs. Evans, you can't." But Julia had already pushed open the heavy wooden door to Ryan's office. The scene before her crystallized in slow motion. Ryan pressed against his desk, his maroon tie askew, with Hannah's arms wrapped around his neck. Their lips broke apart at the sound of the door, and 3 pairs of eyes locked in a moment that would forever divide Julia's life into before and after. "Julia." Ryan's voice cracked as he stumbled backward, his face draining of color. Hannah, her best friend since college, the godmother to their children. The woman who had helped plan their wedding stood frozen, lipstick smeared across her mouth. The velvet ring box slipped from Julia's numb fingers, hitting the carpeted floor with a soft thud that echoed like thunder in the silence. "Julia, please." Hannah reached out, her designer bracelet catching the afternoon light, the same bracelet Julia had given her for her 40th birthday just 2 months ago. "We can explain." Explain. The word tasted like acid in Julia's mouth. Her mind raced through 1,000 memories, family vacations together, Sunday brunches, the way Ryan and Hannah had always shared inside jokes. How long had she been playing the fool in her own life story? Ryan moved toward her, his face contorted with guilt. "Honey, this isn't." "Don't." Julia held up her hand, surprised by how steady it was. "Don't you dare say this isn't what it looks like." The calm in her voice scared her more than any scream could have. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floors with mechanical precision. Rachel avoided her eyes as she passed. The elevator doors closed on the sound of Ryan calling her name, and Julia pressed her forehead against the cool mirror, watching her reflection fracture into 1,000 pieces. The drive home passed in a blur. Julia found herself sitting in her parked car in front of their Craftsman house in Queen Anne. The engine was still running, the house they'd bought 10 years ago with its wraparound porch where they'd spent countless summer evenings with friends, with Hannah and her husband Thomas. Thomas, who was probably as clueless as she had been. Her phone buzzed incessantly, 17 missed calls from Ryan, 23 text messages, 5 voicemails, 1 text from Hannah. "Please let me explain. It's not what you think. There's so much you don't know." Julia laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty car. What she didn't know, she'd spent 15 years building a life with Ryan, believing they were different from other couples who grew apart. They'd weathered his long hours at the firm, the loss of her mother to cancer 3 years ago, the challenges of raising their 2 children. Through it all, they'd remained strong, or so she'd thought. Inside the house, Julia moved through the rooms like a ghost. Family photos lined the walls. Wedding day, mountain vacations, Christmas mornings. Hannah was in so many of them, her arm around Julia's shoulders, both of them smiling at the camera. She had leaned on Hannah after her mother died, more than on Ryan if she were honest. It was Hannah who sat beside her in silence, who brought wine and old stories, who told her she didn't have to be strong every second of every day. Hannah had been her lifeline, the one person outside her family she thought would never betray her. Had there been signs she'd missed? Moments when a touch lingered too long, glances that held more meaning than friendship should allow? Her throat tightened as she walked past each frozen memory. Every picture suddenly felt tainted. There had been warmth, laughter, shared holidays, but now every smile looked like a lie. It was like trying to read a diary someone else had rewritten without her knowing. The house didn't feel like her home anymore. It felt like a carefully arranged illusion. The house phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. Julia almost ignored it, but something made her pick up the receiver. "Mrs. Julia Warren?" An unfamiliar voice, deep and formal. "You don't know me, but I have information about your husband and Hannah Reed that you need to hear. What you saw today, it's only the surface of a much deeper deception." Julia's hand tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants you to know the truth. Check your mailbox. But be careful who you trust with what you find, including your husband's new friend, Daniel Mercer. He's not the ally he'll pretend to be." The line went dead before she could respond. Julia stood frozen, the dial tone humming in her ear. Daniel Mercer. She'd never heard the name before. But something about it sent a chill down her spine. Walking to the mailbox felt like moving through water. Inside, she found a single envelope, no return address, no postmark. Her hands trembled as she opened it, pulling out a photograph that made her blood run cold. It showed Ryan and Hannah, but not from today. This photo was clearly 20 years old. And they weren't alone. 3 other people were with them. Their faces were serious, standing in front of what looked like a cabin. On the back, written in neat block letters, "The truth costs more than just a marriage." June 15th, 2004, asked them about Rachel. The name hung in the air like smoke. Unfamiliar, yet somehow significant. Julia's knees gave slightly as she lowered herself onto the porch steps. Her fingers clutched the photo like a lifeline, even as her mind swirled with fear. How far back did the secrets go? How much of her marriage was built on a story she never knew she was part of? Julia sank onto the porch steps, clutching the photograph, as the spring breeze carried the sound of children playing in nearby yards. Her own children would be home from school soon, expecting their world to be the same as when they left it this morning. But nothing would ever be the same again. As Julia stared at the old photograph, one thought crystallized. In her mind, she had a choice to make. She could either fall apart, or she could find out exactly what kind of lies her perfect life had been built on. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her quickly tuck the photograph into her pocket. Ryan's Audi came to a stop, and he emerged, his face haunted. Behind him, another car parked at the curb, Hannah's silver Lexus. Julia stood, straightening her spine. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but she refused to flinch. The woman inside her, the one who had made excuses, who had played the supportive wife, was done being silent. The time for tears would come later. Right now, she needed answers. And she had a feeling she was about to discover that her husband's infidelity was just the beginning of a much darker story. The silence in the living room felt like a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. Julia sat in her favorite armchair, the mysterious photograph burning a hole in her pocket, while Ryan and Hannah occupied opposite ends of the sofa. The perfect triangle of betrayal, she thought bitterly. "Start talking." Julia's voice cut through the tension. "And I suggest you begin with Rachel." The effect was immediate. Ryan's head snapped up, his face draining of color, while Hannah's sharp intake of breath confirmed Julia's suspicion that the name held significance. The two exchanged a quick glance that spoke volumes. "How do you know that name?" Ryan's question came out barely above a whisper. "That's not how this works," Julia replied, steel entering her voice. "I ask the questions. You provide honest answers for once." Hannah leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Julia, what happened today at the office? It wasn't just a simple affair. There's so much more." "Then explain it to me," Julia interrupted. "Explain why my husband and my best friend would betray me. Explain who Rachel is and why you both look like you've seen a ghost." Ryan stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. "We can't. It's not just our secret to tell. There are people. Agreements were made." "Agreements?" Julia pulled out the photograph and tossed it onto the coffee table. "Like the ones made in this picture?" The reaction was explosive. Hannah gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands, while Ryan snatched up the photo as if it might burst into flames. Julia watched them with surgical precision. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed even. If they were going to unravel, she wanted to witness every crack in their facade. "Where did you get this?" "It seems I'm not the only one interested in your past," Julia said, watching their reactions carefully. "Someone wants the truth to come out. They called me right after I left your office." "Who called you?" Ryan demanded, his lawyer persona emerging. "What exactly did they say?" "They mentioned someone named Daniel Mercer." Julia noticed how both Ryan and Hannah tensed at the name. "Ring any bells?" Hannah shot to her feet. "We need to go. Now, Ryan. We can't do this here." "You're not going anywhere." Julia's tone brooked no argument. "Not until I understand what's really going on. 20 years ago, something happened at that cabin, something involving Rachel and Daniel Mercer. I deserve to know the truth." Ryan sank back onto the sofa, looking suddenly older than his 42 years. "You don't understand what you're asking, Julia. Some truths are better left buried." "Like your affair?" The words tasted bitter on her tongue. "How long has that been going on?" 6 months, Hannah admitted quietly. "But it's not what you think. We never meant to." "Hurt me?" Julia laughed humorlessly. Funny how betrayal always comes with that excuse. She could feel the fury rising in her throat, hot and acidic. It wasn't just about the infidelity, it was about being made a fool of. About every moment she trusted them, every weekend dinner, every shared laugh that now felt poisoned. The doorbell rang, startling all three of them. Through the frosted glass, Julia could make out a tall figure on their porch. Ryan moved faster than she'd ever seen him, practically running to the window. One look outside and his face turned ashen. "Back door, now." He grabbed Hannah's arm. "He's found us." "Who's found you?" Julia demanded. But Ryan was already pushing Hannah toward the kitchen. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. "Julia, don't open that door," Ryan pleaded. "Whatever he tells you, don't trust him. He's not." The sound of breaking glass from the kitchen interrupted him. Hannah screamed. Julia ran toward the sound, only to find a brick on their kitchen floor, wrapped in a piece of paper. With trembling fingers, she unwrapped it, revealing a newspaper clipping from 20 years ago. Local college students still missing after Lake House tragedy. The article featured a young woman's photo, beautiful, smiling, full of life. Rachel Monroe, age 21, last seen at a private cabin near Lake Crescent. The same cabin from the photograph. "Oh God," Hannah whispered, her face pale. "He's gonna tell her everything." The doorbell rang a third time. Julia looked between Ryan and Hannah, their faces masks of terror. Then, at the newspaper clipping in her hands. Her hands were still shaking, the edges of the paper digging into her palms. Somewhere in her chest, a knot of dread was twisting tighter. Whoever was on the other side of that door, it wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about everything they had buried with her. Making her decision, she walked to the front door and opened it. A man in his mid-40s stood on her porch, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. His silver-streaked dark hair and patrician features gave him an air of authority. But it was his eyes that caught Julia's attention, deep brown and filled with an intensity that made her step back involuntarily. "Mrs. Warren," he smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Daniel Mercer. I believe we need to talk about what really happened to my sister Rachel." Behind her, Julia heard Ryan's sharp intake of breath. The pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a picture far darker than a simple affair. "Come in, Mr. Mercer." Julia stepped aside, ignoring Ryan's protests. "I think it's time everyone told the truth." Daniel entered, his presence filling the room like a gathering storm. He nodded curtly to Ryan and Hannah, who had moved closer together, their earlier intimacy forgotten in the face of this new threat. 20 years is a long time to keep a secret. Daniel's voice was smooth, controlled. "Especially one that weighs so heavily on the conscience. Isn't that right, Ryan? Hannah?" "You have no right to come here." Ryan stepped forward, positioning himself between Daniel and Hannah. "We had an agreement." "Agreements become void when trust is broken," Daniel replied coldly. "Just ask your wife about trust, Ryan, or perhaps Hannah can explain why she's been helping you maintain this charade all these years." Julia's head spun with questions. What exactly happened to Rachel? "That's what I've spent 20 years trying to prove." Daniel turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "Your husband, Hannah, and their friends told the police it was an accident, that Rachel was drunk, went swimming in the lake at night and drowned. But there was no body, Mrs. Warren. No real evidence, just their word and a convenient story. It was an accident. Hannah's voice cracked. We never meant for any of it to happen. Then why hide the truth for 20 years? Daniel's question hung in the air like smoke. Why continue to protect each other, even to the point of destroying your own marriages? Julia's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even known existed. The affair? It wasn't really an affair, was it? You were meeting to discuss this, because someone was threatening to expose what happened that night. Ryan closed his eyes, defeat written across his features. We thought we could handle it ourselves. When the letters started coming 6 months ago, Hannah and I began meeting in secret. We needed to figure out who was trying to blackmail us. What they knew. And your solution was to let me believe you were having an affair? Julia's voice rose with incredulity. Rather than tell me the truth about what happened 20 years ago? The truth. Daniel's laugh was cold. They can't even admit the truth to themselves, Mrs. Warren, but I have proof now. Proof that what happened to Rachel was no accident, and your husband and his friends are finally going to face the consequences of their actions. The sound of police sirens in the distance grew louder. Daniel smiled, a predator's smile that sent chills down Julia's spine. That would be the detective I contacted this morning, he said calmly. I believe he'll be very interested in the new evidence. I've uncovered proof that suggests Rachel Monroe didn't drown that night. Evidence that points to something far more sinister. As red and blue lights began to flash through the windows, Julia looked at her husband, this man she thought she knew so well, and saw a stranger. The affair had been a smokescreen, hiding something far worse. And now, as police cars pulled up outside their house, she realized her perfect life hadn't just been built on lies. It had been built on a foundation of buried secrets, ones that were finally clawing their way to the surface. The police station's interrogation room felt colder than it should for a spring evening. Julia sat alone, her fingers wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, while through the window she could see Ryan in another room, speaking with detectives. 3 hours had passed since they'd all been brought in for questioning. The minutes had dragged like hours. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, matching the thrum in her temples. She had cycled through denial, rage, and now this cold, suspended state of disbelief. There had been a time, not long ago, when just seeing Ryan walk into a room calmed her. After her mother died, it was his steady presence that kept her anchored. He held her when she collapsed into grief, told her they'd build new traditions, raise their kids with her mother's values. She had believed in that promise. Detective Langston, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 50s, entered the room carrying a thick file. Mrs. Warren, thank you for your patience. We've been reviewing the Rachel Monroe case files from 20 years ago, and your husband's statement from that night raises some interesting questions. I'm still trying to understand it myself, Julia admitted, watching as the detective spread old photographs across the table, crime scene photos from the cabin, pictures of a younger Ryan, Hannah, and 3 other people she didn't recognize, all looking scared and defensive. Each image hit her like a slap. Frozen faces of people who had locked a secret behind their eyes for decades. Faces she now realized were capable of things she hadn't wanted to believe. According to the original report, Langston continued, your husband, Hannah Reed, Christopher Dent, Amanda Liu, and Benjamin Marks were the last people to see Rachel Monroe alive. They claim she went swimming after drinking at a party. The lake was searched for weeks, but no body was ever found. Julia's attention caught on one detail. You mentioned 3 other names. Where are they now? That's where things get interesting. Langston pulled out 3 more recent photographs. Christopher Dent died in a car accident 10 years ago. Amanda Liu disappeared 5 years ago. Her case is still open. And Benjamin Marks, she paused meaningfully. He committed suicide 3 months ago, shortly after receiving an anonymous letter. Julia's breath caught. The air in the room felt thinner suddenly, pressing against her chest. Her hand reached instinctively toward the coffee cup, not for warmth, but for something solid. Something to hold when everything else was collapsing. The timing clicked in Julia's mind. 3 months ago. That's when Ryan and Hannah started meeting in secret. Exactly. Langston leaned forward. Mrs. Warren, we believe someone has been systematically targeting everyone involved in Rachel's disappearance. Daniel Mercer provided us with copies of threatening letters sent to each person over the past year. But here's what's peculiar. The letters didn't demand money. They demanded confessions. A knock at the door interrupted them. Another detective entered, whispering something to Langston that made her eyebrows shoot up. She excused herself quickly, leaving Julia alone with the scattered photographs and her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Hannah being led to another interrogation room, her perfect composure finally cracking. The sight brought no satisfaction to Julia. Only a deep, aching sadness for all the lies that had poisoned their relationships. Her stomach churned as she watched her former friends stumble under the weight of truth. Julia wanted to hate her, but hate required clarity. All she felt was the bruising ache of disillusionment. Her cell phone buzzed in her purse. A text from an unknown number. Ask about the necklace. Some secrets don't stay buried in dark waters. Before she could process this new cryptic message, Detective Langston returned, her expression grave. Mrs. Warren, we've just received some disturbing information. Amanda Liu's body was found this morning in Lake Crescent near the original cabin site. Initial evidence suggests she's been dead for several years. Julia felt the room spin slightly. Was she murdered? Yes, and there's more. The forensics team found traces of Rachel Monroe's DNA in the cabin's foundation. We believe both women were killed there, years apart. Julia gripped the edge of the table, her pulse thudding in her ears. It was no longer a story buried in her husband's past. It was a graveyard she had unknowingly shared her life with. The door burst open as Ryan's lawyer, Patrick Ellison, strode in. This interview is over. My client's wife is leaving now. Actually, Julia stood slowly. I'm staying, and I'm not sure I'm still your client's wife. She turned to Detective Langston. There's something else you should know. I received another text just now about a necklace in dark waters. The effect on Ellison was immediate. He reached for his phone, but Langston was faster, confiscating it as potential evidence. Mr. Ellison, I suggest you return to your client. Mrs. Warren clearly has more to share with us. After Ellison left, Julia pulled out her phone, showing the detective the text. Someone knows more than they're letting on. And I don't think it's just Daniel Mercer. Mrs. Warren, Langston said carefully. What do you know about Benjamin Marks's suicide note? Nothing. I didn't even know he existed until today. The detective pulled out a sealed evidence bag containing a handwritten letter. He wrote this before he died. The necklace will prove what we did. I can't live with it anymore. Rachel deserved better. And so did Amanda. Check the Lake House Foundation under the north corner. God forgive us all. Julia's hands trembled as she read through the protective plastic. So when they searched the foundation, they found more than just DNA. They found Rachel Monroe's silver necklace, embedded in the concrete, and wrapped around it was a USB drive preserved in a waterproof case. The implications hit Julia like a physical blow. They killed her. And then She couldn't finish the sentence. Her vision blurred as a sharp sting filled her eyes. The idea that a young woman, someone full of life, someone once laughing in photographs, had been sealed into cement like an inconvenient truth, made Julia's stomach churn. Her breath came in shallow, uneven pulls. We believe Rachel was killed the night she disappeared, and her body was hidden in the foundation when the cabin was renovated shortly after, Langston said. Amanda Liu likely discovered this years later, leading to her own murder. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Hannah collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, while Ryan stood in his interrogation room, his face buried in his hands. Julia stared at them numbly. The scene looked like justice, but it felt like grief. A punishment 20 years too late, unraveling in real time. Detective Langston closed the file. Mrs. Warren, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. The USB drive contained video footage from that night. It shows all 5 of them, including your husband and Hannah Reed, moving something heavy wrapped in a tarp. The timestamp matches the night Rachel disappeared. Julia fought back nausea. Why? What possible reason could they have had? According to Benjamin Marks's full confession, found after his death, Langston said, Rachel had discovered something about their wealthy family's business dealings, illegal operations that would have destroyed multiple lives if exposed. They confronted her at the cabin. Things got out of hand. And Langston let the sentence hang. And they've been covering it up ever since, Julia finished, her voice hollow. Living their lives, going to work, attending parties, raising families, all while knowing what they'd done. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. How many lies had she swallowed without tasting them? How many holidays, how many shared moments were built on silence and blood? The guilt ate at them differently, Langston explained. Marks couldn't take it anymore. Lou tried to expose the truth and paid with her life. The others created a pact of silence. Julia said nothing, thinking of all the times she'd seen Ryan and Hannah whispering together at family gatherings, the inside jokes she'd attributed to their long friendship. But why start meeting again 6 months ago? Because someone else knew the truth, a new voice said from the doorway. Daniel Mercer stood there, looking grimmer than before. Someone who waited 20 years to play their final hand. Detective Langston straightened. Mr. Mercer, this is a closed interview. It's all right, Julia said, studying Daniel's face. I think it's time we heard the whole truth, starting with why you really came forward now, after all these years. Daniel's expression hardened. Because 3 months ago I received a package. Inside was my sister's diary, detailing everything she'd discovered about the family's corruption, and a second USB drive, footage showing exactly who suggested hiding her body in the foundation. He looked Julia in the eye. Would you like to know who it was, Mrs. Warren? Before he could answer, gunshots rang out from somewhere in the station. Screams erupted as officers rushed past the interrogation room. Through the chaos, Julia heard Detective Langston's radio crackle. Officer down. Suspect is armed and heading for interrogation room C. Julia's blood ran cold as she realized which room that was. Hannah's room. The truth was about to get even darker. Chaos erupted in the police station as officers rushed toward the sound of gunfire. Detective Langston pushed Julia and Daniel behind a desk, drawing her weapon. Through the glass partition, Julia caught a glimpse of a figure in a security guard's uniform moving purposefully through the hallway. That's not one of our officers, Langston muttered, her radio crackling with urgent communications. Another shot rang out, closer this time, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Julia's heart nearly stopped when she heard Hannah's scream from the next room. The figure in the security uniform was heading straight for her. Without thinking, Julia moved toward the door, but Daniel grabbed her arm. Don't, he warned. This is exactly what they want. Chaos, confusion, more deaths to cover up the truth. Mrs. Warren, stay down, Langston ordered, moving toward the door. But before she could reach it, the lights went out, plunging the station into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie shadows across the walls. In the dim red glow, Julia saw Ryan break free from his interrogation room, running toward Hannah's location. The fake security guard turned, raising their weapon. Time seemed to slow as Julia recognized something in the shooter's stance, in the way they moved. Amanda, she whispered in shock. The figure froze for a split second, turning slightly toward Julia's voice. In that moment, Detective Langston acted, tackling the shooter to the ground. The gun skittered across the bay floor as they struggled. When additional officers finally subdued the attacker and the lights flickered back on, Julia's suspicion was confirmed. Amanda Lou, very much alive, despite what the police had found at the lake, stared back at them with wild eyes. You were supposed to be dead. Hannah's voice shook as she emerged from her room, Ryan protectively at her side. We saw you. You saw what I wanted you to see, Amanda spat, struggling against the officer's grip, just like you made everyone see what you wanted them to see 20 years ago. But I'm not the only one who knows the truth anymore, am I, Hannah? Detective Langston quickly took charge of the situation, ordering Amanda to be secured in a high-security holding cell. As officers led her away, she called out, "Ask them about the second video. Ask about what really happened after Rachel died." The next hour passed in a blur of statements and security protocols. Julia found herself in a larger conference room with Ryan, Hannah, Daniel, and Detective Langston. The weight of Amanda's appearance hung heavy in the air. Let me guess, Daniel broke the tense silence. Amanda Lou discovered the truth about Rachel years ago, but instead of coming forward, she saw an opportunity. She used her knowledge to manipulate all of you, maybe even helped orchestrate Benjamin Marks's suicide. She contacted me first, Hannah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months ago, said she had proof of what we'd done, not just to Rachel, but everything that came after. The corporate fraud, the cover-ups, the way our families built their empires. Unburied secrets, Ryan murmured, running his hands through his hair, looking utterly defeated. We thought if we could find her, convince her to keep quiet, but she always seemed one step ahead. Then Benjamin killed himself, and everything started unraveling. The body they found in the lake, Julia pieced it together. Amanda planted it, to fake her death, to watch how you'd all react, to see if you'd finally break under the pressure. Detective Langston laid out several evidence bags on the conference table. We found these in Amanda's car, multiple burner phones, surveillance photos of all of you, and this. She held up a USB drive, similar to the one found with Rachel's necklace. It seems Miss Liu was quite thorough in documenting everything. Play it, Daniel demanded. Let's see what other secrets my sister's murderers have been keeping. The detective inserted the drive into a laptop, and grainy footage filled the screen. It showed the cabin from 20 years ago, but not from the night of Rachel's death. This was days later. A younger Ryan, Hannah, and Amanda stood arguing with 2 older men Julia didn't recognize. That's Patrick Ellison, Ryan said quietly, and Jonathan Dent, Christopher's father. They helped us cover it up, made sure the police investigation went nowhere. The video continued, showing Ellison handling documents while Dent made phone calls. Money changed hands. The young group looked terrified, but compliant. They blackmailed us, Hannah's voice cracked. Said they had evidence that would implicate us all in Rachel's death. They used us, used our guilt and fear, to help them hide their own crimes. The corrupt business dealings Rachel had discovered. It went all the way to the top of both families. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the screen. So you didn't just kill my sister. You let her murderers use her death to strengthen their criminal empire. Built your careers on her grave. We were young, scared, Ryan protested weakly. We thought we had no choice. There's always a choice, Julia spoke for the first time in hours. Just like you had a choice to tell me the truth months ago, instead of letting me believe you were having an affair. Every lie, every cover-up, was a choice. Detective Langston paused the video. Mr. Mercer, the evidence you provided earlier, combined with this new footage and Amanda Liu's arrest, gives us enough to move on the bigger players. Patrick Ellison, the Dent estate, all of it. It won't bring Rachel back, Daniel said quietly, or erase 20 years of lies. No, Julia agreed, looking at her husband, this stranger she'd shared her life with. But maybe it can stop 20 more years of corruption and death. The words tasted bittersweet. Justice was no substitute for innocence lost. But silence was worse. Hannah suddenly straightened, her face draining of color. Wait, if Amanda's here, then who sent the latest messages? The texts about the necklace, the warnings? Before anyone could respond, Julia's phone buzzed with a new message. The number was blocked, but the text was clear. Final piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow, noon. The cabin. Come alone, or Ellison goes public with everything, including what really happened to Rachel Monroe's body after they moved it from the foundation. Some secrets are worth killing for. Just ask your husband what they did with the real evidence. The room fell silent as Julia showed them the message. Ryan looked like he might be sick. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His silence screamed louder than any confession. Detective Langston immediately began coordinating with her team, but Julia barely heard them. Her eyes were fixed on her husband, seeing the guilt and fear warring on his face. Ryan, she said softly, dangerously, what haven't you told us? The answer, she knew, would change everything again. She could feel the weight of it pressing down already, a truth so heavy it bent the air in the room. Her breath caught, sensing the next unraveling was moments away. And beneath it all, a quiet fear she hadn't voiced, not even to herself. What if this ended badly? What if she didn't come back from the cabin? Who would explain this to their children? They thought she was strong, and she was, but she was also a mother. And the idea of her children waking up one day to whispers, to news reports, to another buried truth, it chilled her more than anything Ellison could do. The old cabin looked smaller than in the photographs, its weathered walls bearing 20 years of secrets. Julia stood at the edge of the property line, watching the morning mist roll off Lake Crescent. Despite Detective Langston's protests, she had come alone, or at least appeared to. The police surveillance team was hidden in the surrounding woods, waiting. The burner phone they'd given her showed 11:57 a.m. 3 minutes until the meeting that would finally reveal the last piece of this twisted puzzle. Ryan's confession from the night before still echoed in her mind, each word another nail in the coffin of their marriage. "We didn't just hide Rachel's body in the foundation," he had admitted, broken and hollow-eyed in the interrogation room. "When the investigation started getting too close, Ellison ordered us to move it. But Rachel, she wasn't completely gone. The cold water had preserved enough to prove what we'd done." The image haunted her. Rachel's body moved like a pawn in a game none of them had the courage to stop. Julia had once envied her husband's strength. Now she saw it was cowardice, dressed in obedience. The cabin door creaked open, pulling Julia from the memory. Patrick Ellison himself stood in the doorway, his expensive suit incongruous against the rustic backdrop. The man who had orchestrated 20 years of cover-ups and corruption looked oddly diminished in the harsh daylight. "Mrs. Warren," he called out, "I assume you're wearing a wire. Doesn't matter anymore. Some stories need to be told in full." Julia approached cautiously, her hand brushing against the recording device hidden beneath her jacket. "You were the one sending the messages, not Amanda." "Clever girl." Ellison's smile held no warmth. Amanda Liu was a useful distraction. Her obsession with exposing the truth made her the perfect scapegoat, but she never knew the whole story. Inside the cabin, Julia's eyes adjusted to the dim light. A laptop sat open on a dusty table, displaying what looked like old security footage. Ellison gestured for her to sit. 20 years ago," he began, "Rachel Monroe discovered something that could have destroyed not just the Dent and Ellison families, but half of Seattle's elite. Money laundering, fraud, political bribes, decades of careful work building our empires. She was going to expose everything." "So you had her killed?" "No." Ellison's expression darkened. "Your husband and his friends did that all on their own, a confrontation that got out of hand. But afterward, when they came to me, panicked and covered in blood, I saw an opportunity." He pressed play on the laptop. The footage showed the cabin's interior, date stamped 3 days after Rachel's death. A younger Ryan, Hannah, and the others were moving something wrapped in plastic from the foundation. Ellison's voice continued over the silent video. "I made them an offer. We would protect them from prosecution, give them careers, wealth, everything they dreamed of. In exchange, they became our puppets. Every illegal document they notarized, every corrupt deal they facilitated, all while Rachel's body remained our insurance policy." "Where did you move her?" Julia asked, though she dreaded the answer. The Lake House Foundation was just the beginning. "Over the years, we moved her remains multiple times, always keeping evidence in different locations. Insurance, you see. As long as everyone had something to lose, no one could talk." A noise from outside made them both turn. Through the window, Julia saw Daniel Mercer emerge from the tree line, a gun trained steadily on the cabin. "Right on time," Ellison smiled. The grieving brother, finally putting the pieces together. "Did you really think I didn't know about the surveillance team, Mrs. Warren? That I didn't plan for this moment?" The door burst open as Daniel entered, his face a mask of cold fury. "You're going to tell me where my sister is? All of her? Every piece you monsters scattered to protect yourselves?" "Daniel," Julia started to rise, but Ellison's next words froze her in place. "She's here," he said simply. "Under our feet. The foundation you're standing on, it's not the original. We rebuilt it 5 years ago," Ellison said, "and this time we made sure she'd never be found. Ground-penetrating radar, forensic tests, nothing will find her now." Daniel's hand tightened on the gun. "You're lying." "Am I? Check your phone, Mr. Mercer. The video should be arriving right about now." A chime sounded from Daniel's pocket. Still keeping the gun aimed at Ellison, he pulled out his phone with his free hand. His face went ashen as he watched whatever had been sent. "You recorded it," he whispered. "You recorded everything, every reburial, every moment of their guilt. 20 years of insurance, ready to destroy them all with a single upload. Your sister's death bought me 2 decades of absolute control over Seattle's most powerful families. Julia's mind raced. Something wasn't adding up. Why tell us this now? She asked. Why risk everything after all these years? Ellison's laugh was hollow. Because I'm dying, Mrs. Warren. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 3 months to live at best. And I wanted you all to know, every one of you who thought you could expose the truth, who thought you could unravel my life's work, that I won. Even in death, I won. No. Daniel's voice shook with rage. You didn't. He reached into his jacket with his free hand, pulling out a small device. A red light blinked steadily. Ellison's smug expression faltered. What is that? A transmitter? Julia realized, hope blooming in her chest. Everything you just said, it wasn't just being recorded by my wire, was it? It was live streaming, Daniel confirmed grimly. To every major news outlet in Seattle. Your confession, the video files, everything. It's all public now. Detective Langston made sure of that. The sound of sirens filled the air as police vehicles approached the cabin. Ellison's face contorted with fury as he lunged for Daniel's gun. A shot rang out, then another. Julia ducked as chaos erupted. When the dust settled, Ellison lay bleeding on the cabin floor, Daniel's bullet in his shoulder. Outside, she could hear Detective Langston coordinating with forensic teams. The foundation would be excavated properly. This time, Rachel would finally be found. Finally be laid to rest with dignity. Hours later, Julia stood watching the sunset over Lake Crescent. Ryan and Hannah had been formally charged, along with Ellison and several other members of Seattle's elite. Amanda Liu had agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. The truth was finally, fully exposed. Daniel approached, looking exhausted, but somehow lighter. The DA thinks they can make a case for premeditated murder against Ellison, he said. The videos prove he was orchestrating everything from the beginning, using Rachel's death to build his empire. And Ryan? Hannah? Voluntary manslaughter for Rachel's death, conspiracy charges for everything after. With their cooperation, they might see freedom again someday. Julia nodded, feeling the weight of her wedding ring on her finger. Slowly, deliberately, she removed it, holding it up to catch the last rays of sunlight. 20 years of lies, she said softly, built on one moment of violence and fear. All those lives, destroyed, corrupted, ended. And for what? Money? Power? Fear is the most powerful motivator, Daniel replied. Fear of consequences, fear of truth, fear of losing everything you've built. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Rachel taught me that. Julia dropped the ring into the lake, watching it disappear beneath the dark waters like Rachel, like the truth. It had been submerged for years. But unlike her husband's secrets, this was a weight she could finally let go. What will you do now? Daniel asked. Start over. Find out who I am without the lies. She turned to face him. And you? Make sure Rachel's story is told. All of it. The corruption, the cover-ups. People need to know what really happened here. As they walked away from the cabin, Julia felt something shift inside her. The pain wasn't gone, it might never fully heal, but with each step, she was moving toward something new. Something true. Behind them, forensic teams began their work, finally unearthing the secrets buried in blood and concrete. Rachel Monroe would have justice at last, and Julia Warren would have something just as valuable, freedom from the weight of other people's lies. The truth, she had learned, was like the lake itself, deep, dark, and ultimately unstoppable. No matter how hard people tried to bury it, it would always find its way to the surface. Dear friend, in the end, the hardest truth isn't the one we uncover. It's the one we accept. Like Julia, many of us carry weights we didn't choose: betrayal, silence, loss. And yet, as the Stoics remind us, what matters is not what happens to us, but how we respond. Julia could have stayed trapped in bitterness, but instead she chose clarity over comfort, truth over illusion. That is courage, not in noise, but in quiet resolve. You too have the strength to stand up to what's buried, to what's broken, and begin again. Because sometimes the most powerful freedom comes not from holding on, but from letting go. Keep moving forward, not because the past is gone, but because you still have the power to shape what comes next. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It helps us continue creating stories that speak to the heart and to the soul.